You know, we've been going through the book of Acts on Sunday mornings for over a year, and we are actually 3 sermons away from being completed with the book of Acts. And so, as we have read through this book, we've been looking through the journey of a guy named Paul, especially. And we've been seeing the very beginnings of the church. We have been able to extrapolate some of the characteristics of this early church and say, hey, if it was good enough for the God ordained early church, it should be good enough for us 2,000 years later. We've talked about the boldness of many of the witnesses, and now we are almost at the end. And what's happening is Paul has been arrested, he's appealed to Caesar, and he is on his way to Rome. So that's where we're going to pick up the story today. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Acts chapter 27. Acts chapter 27. And so today I'm going to take a very strange take on this passage. Maybe one that you have not heard before, maybe one that you did not think if you would have read this passage. But my question to you, and maybe this is just me, but have you ever had a boss who made a decision that you don't agree with? Or maybe a politician or a community leader of some sort made a decision that affected you that you would not have made. You may be upset about that. You may disagree vehemently with them about that. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like, you know what? I should be in charge. If they would just make me in charge, then things would go better. In my business, at school, in my place I live, wherever in the country, in government, wherever it may be. You say, well, I should be in charge. I would do better. Several years ago, I got given a book by my boss at work, and it had this title, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And that title fascinated me. And I thought, wait a second. You mean you can lead if you're not in charge? I thought the two were synonyms. I thought the two went together, that they were inextricably bound together. I thought people that are in charge automatically lead, and if you lead, you must be in charge. But what it said in this book was that that's not necessarily true. Sometimes people may have a position, they may have a title, they may have an office, but they're not an actual leader. And some people that are leaders don't have the position, don't have the nameplate in front of their office, don't have the power that someone else might have. That these two things were actually different. Sometimes they can go together, but not always. And so I found that fascinating. And honestly, I opened that book and I was like, I've got to read everything I possibly can on this subject. How to lead when you're not in charge. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think my boss wanted to give me some, suggestive hints by like putting it like, hey, you're not in charge, so, be a better employee and that kind of thing. But here's the truth. I ate that book up. I loved it. I learned so much and I grew so much, and that concept has stuck with me. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that. I don't know if you've ever read a book like that. I don't know if you've ever considered that. But here's the situation. Today, we are going to see 5 characteristics from the life of Paul in the story that we're reading, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. So what happens is Paul's going to be put on a ship with over 270 people on board. And their goal is they want to get to Rome. But the problem was they left at the wrong time. And so Paul is not the captain of the ship. He is not the skipper. He is not in charge. He is being transported as a prisoner. He is not just close to being at the top. He's actually close to being at the bottom of this situation. And yet, God is going to use him in an amazing way as he shows us how to lead when we're not in charge. So, I want you to see 5 characteristics. We're going to go through this whole chapter as we talk about this shipwreck that Paul encounters here in Acts chapter 27. The first thing I want you to see from the text this morning is that if we want to lead when we're not in charge, we need to build relationships founded on trust. Build relationships founded on trust. If you want to lead when you're not in charge, make sure that you build relationships that are founded on trust. Acts chapter 27, verse 1, it says, "And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some of the prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And embarking in a ship of, I don't know how to say this, Adorectium, I don't know, which was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day, we put in at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for." All right, let's stop there. Because there's something significant in the text that you may or may not have seen. Because it's very uncommon for anyone to release a prisoner to go to his friends and be cared for. Like it says about Paul in the text, that Julius released him to go to his friends and be cared for before he was going to set sail. Now, there are 2 really bad things that could have happened to Julius in this situation. The first is this: Paul could have gone out. He could have started being with some of his friends, and the Jewish people could have seen him. Remember, they hated Paul. They wanted to kill him. They tried to kill him multiple times. They could have assassinated him while he was released. If he was assassinated while technically he was under Julius's care, Julius would have been responsible for the killing of a Roman citizen and would not have been good for him. Second thing that could have happened is that Paul could have used this opportunity to literally escape and to flee and to go away. Again, would not have been good for the centurion that was put over Paul in his care. And so, how did this happen? How did this come about? It is obvious that even though we don't have the details, Julius grew to trust Paul enough to risk severe consequences if this trust was misplaced. Trust is not built in shallow relationships. You know that? Trust is not built in shallow relationships. If you are trying to use people to get to the top of an org chart or a social ladder, that is not the pathway to build trust. So how does someone build trust in relationships like the one that we see here? There's a couple of very practical things. I think one of them is to be consistent. Be a consistent person. That means no matter where you are, no matter when it is, you're going to be the same person in all situations, right? You're not going to be one way around this group of people and another way around this group of people. You're not going to put a mask over here on. You're not going to put a different mask when you're with this group of people or in this situation. Be a consistent person. What does this do? It helps people to understand, okay, this person, no matter the situation, no matter what's going on in their life, no matter who they are around, they're going to be the same person. This builds trust in a relationship. This is, I can begin to predict how this person is going to respond. I can begin to predict what this person is going to say or how they're going to act. Why? Because I've seen it happen over and over again consistently. That builds trust in a relationship. The second way that we can build trust in a relationship in just a very practical sense is to do what you say. That's so simple, and yet so many times today, that is the greatest element of the breaking of trust. that people say something and then they don't do it, or they do the opposite, which is even worse, right? And so if you want to build trust in relationships, which is an element of leading when you're not in charge, hey, make sure that you do what you say. If you say you're going to do something, back it up, no matter how hard it is. And can I just tell you this? If you can't back it up, don't say it, right? If you can't do it, then don't say it. Don't make promises that you can't keep. You know, right now, Mallory and I are making sure that our boys know this. When we tell you we're going to discipline you if you do something, and then you do that thing, and we don't discipline you, what do they think? I can get away with anything. I can do anything I want. It doesn't matter what threat my parents put on me. They're not going to do it. They're not going to give me time out. They're not going to give me a spanking. They're not going to put my bedtime earlier. They're not going to take video games or outside time away from me. So when we say, if you do that thing one more time, this is what's going to happen. And they do that thing one more time, guess what? We got to do the promised punishment. Even though a lot of times, Mallory, we don't want to do that. We're not excited about that. We're not looking forward to that. That's not what we want to do, but we got to do it. Why? Because it starts to build trust in that relationship. Okay, mom and dad, when they tell me something, they're going to do it. When they tell me, hey, we're going to go here and do this, they're going to do that. We were having a conversation with our youngest son just the other day where he said something and we said, James, that's not true. Stop saying it. And he said, well, I didn't say I promise, so it's okay. I said, well, let me ask you this. After everything that mom and dad says, do we say I promise? No. Are we trustworthy people? Yes. Why? Because Scripture says let your yes be yes and your no be no. You sit and say, I have to swear, I swear to you, or I promise you this. It should just be, if we say it, it's going to come about. I said, how would you like this? If we told you later tonight, we're going to go get ice cream. And then later tonight came and you said, hey, what about that ice cream you promised? And we said, well, we didn't say I promise, so we're not going to get ice cream. He said, well, no. I said, exactly. We got to do what we say. We got to be trustworthy people. That will build trust in relationships very, very quickly. If we simply do what we say and are consistent people. That's what we see in the text from Paul, and that was the basis, y'all, the basis for his entire interaction that we're going to see on this ship. But the second thing is this, we're going to keep moving. If you want to lead when you're not in charge, speak with wisdom when given the opportunity. Watch this, verse 5. And when we had sailed across the open sea, along the coast of Sicilia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra and Lycia. There a centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy and put us on board. I wonder if my mother-in-law's name Myra came from that text. I don't know. I'd never heard that name. I hope she's tuning in right now online. But I don't know if it came from that verse, Mal, but we're gonna find out later today. We sailed slowly, verse 7, that was an aside, for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus. And as the wind did not allow us to go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salmone. Coasting along it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lycia. Since much time had passed and the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them, here's the speaking up part, saying, sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. All right, let's stop for a second. Paul most likely had the most experience on driving a ship of anyone on board, including the captain, including the owner of the ship. He had been to more places in more difficult circumstances than probably any of them. And so he says to them, hey guys, listen, I don't think this is a good time. I don't think it's going to work out for us well. If we leave the harbor, we are putting not only the cargo at risk, we're putting not only the ship at risk, but we're putting our very lives at risk. And did you see the response? The response of the centurion was he did not listen to Paul, but decided, hey, I'm going to listen to the captain. I'm going to listen to the owner. And it says they had a majority that decided to put out to sea. What does that mean? It means likely they took a vote. Likely they took a vote to say, hey, what are you guys saying? What do y'all think? Should we go or should we stay? Are we going to follow Paul's advice over here, or are we going to go out and we're going to do our own thing? So that's what was going on. But there's no doubt that Paul had carefully calculated what he was going to say. He did not blurt this out as if having to speak to hear himself speak. All right? Now, this is really important when we're talking about how to lead when you're not in charge. Sometimes people that want to be in charge are not in charge and want to lead. One of the things they love the most is to hear themselves talk, right? And so they'll say all kinds of things. They will fill up dictionaries and volumes of accounts of all of their stories and all of their opinions and everything like that. I'm not talking about that. If you want to lead when you're not in charge, when given the opportunity, there's a very key word in that second point, to speak with wisdom. To speak with wisdom. Not to speak at all times, not to tell your greatest hits of stories, but to speak in a way that is wise. You know, I've been in meetings before where I've kind of been like that chair that's in the corner. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not around the conference table. I didn't get one of those seats. I'm in the chair in the corner. I'm like, I guess, supposed to basically audit the meeting. I'm just supposed to be there, just maybe to see what goes on. And sometimes I was asked my opinion or to speak on something that was being discussed. And I can tell you with all transparency, there are times that I followed this and I did speak with wisdom, and times that I did not calculate at all what I was about to say. And immediately when the words got out of my mouth, I wanted to put them back in. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe I'm the only one that's ever done that, but it's definitely happened to me, okay? And here's the thing. What begins to happen when someone speaks with wisdom, not speaks up at every single opportunity whenever there's quiet. No, when someone speaks in a calculated and a wise way, people begin to notice that person. They begin to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we should listen to this person. They don't always talk about everything. They don't have an opinion, or if they do have an opinion, they're not sharing it at every turn. They're speaking in a little bit different of a way. It's a way that you can begin to lead even though you may be the chair in the corner, even though you may not be at the executive table, but you're able to say, you know what? I want to speak in a way that ultimately gives glory to God. I also find it interesting that Paul doesn't throw a fit when they decide not to go with his advice. He's not like, well, y'all forget it. Y'all can just go ahead and die. You know, that's not what he does. The text doesn't tell us that he has any response to getting shot down. And I think that's a great way to see it for us too. Because we We want people to take our advice, right? It's one of the most annoying things in life when people don't take our advice, okay? Let's just put it very clearly. But here's the thing. We shouldn't be reacting. We shouldn't be bombastic about it in any way or anything like that. We should just say, okay, I'm going to accept it and I'm going to leave it up to God. I'm not going to get bitter. I'm not going to act out of anger. I'm going to leave it up to God. And the next time that I'm asked to speak, I'm going to do the same exact thing and speak from a place of wisdom that I can get from the Lord. Third thing in the text is this. If we want to lead when we're not in charge, constantly encourage others in the Lord. Constantly encourage others in the Lord. Verse 13. Now, when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete close to the shore. But soon a tempestuous wind called a northeaster struck down from the land. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along, running under the lee of a small island called Cauda. We managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat, and hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus they were driven along. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo, and on the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. Bad situation, bad storm, bad situation, very desperate. Verse 20, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet, now I urge you to take heart. Watch that, that's underlined. That's encouragement number one. So, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. Watch this. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have told you, but we must run aground on some island. Now, this is the lowest moment of the story. The people have almost lost all hope for surviving this trip. They're throwing cargo off the ship. They're failing to see any break in the storm and have not eaten for some time. Maybe it's because they're so seasick that they can't possibly stomach any food, or maybe it's because of busyness that they're simply trying to stay afloat. Whatever it is, they have not eaten in a long time. And it is at this moment that Paul comes in and delivers a message of encouragement from the Lord to those people. And he says this, did you see it? Verse 22, I urge you to take heart. Do not be afraid. Take heart. I have faith. So over and over and over again, he says, at your lowest point, guys, even though you didn't take my advice, which would not have put you in this situation, I'm not going to get bitter. I'm not going to explain to you why I said everything that I said. I'm going to encourage you from the Lord. I'm telling you, there are plenty of people in the workplace today that have a sky is falling mentality. Everything is negative. Everything is going wrong. Nothing good could possibly happen in their life, in your life, or in anybody's life. Every boss is wrong. All they want to do is complain. I mean, we got a lady that comes up here to the YMCA, and every time she works out, she's on the phone and she's mad about something. I mean, mad about something. every single time. And while I'm working out, she's in there and she takes call after call after call, and it's negative every single time. Every single time. Do you know what that tells me? That tells me she has no interest in encouragement from anyone in her life. But we can be different. We don't have to be like that. In the midst of a time where people are saying all hope is lost, we can come in and share with them the greatest hope this world has ever known. That a Savior came down to forgive us of our sin and to give us hope beyond this world. We have that message. We have that truth. We have that promise in our life. And we can be those people that say, you know what? I'm going to encourage you. Not just to give you good vibes or good energy. I'm going to encourage you from the Lord. That's what I want to do. You're not trying to hard sell your coworkers on a turn or burn mentality. You're saying to them, listen, hey, I've got a message for you, and I want to encourage you in the Lord. No matter what someone's going through in their life. No matter what's happening. No matter what fear may be creeping in their life. No matter what struggle they may be facing. You can tell them, hey, I want to encourage you, and I promise you, if you become known for being an encourager, you may not have the title of a leader, but you will be seen as a leader in your workplace. Because you'll be seen as someone who's different. Someone who's not like everybody else. Someone who has hope, not just blind hope, but someone who is an actual encourager. I'm telling you, if you want to lead when you're not in charge, be a person that constantly encourages others in the Lord. Number 4, stick to your convictions and values. If you want to lead when you're not in charge, stick to your convictions and values. Verse 27. When the 14th night had come, as we were being driven along the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took us a sounding and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took a sounding again and found 15 fathoms. And fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea under pretense of laying out anchors from the bow, from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it go. So here's what's happening. They begin to take some measurements of the water around them, and they realize that it's not getting deeper, it's getting more shallow. And so they think, hey, we're about to run up on land. Let's set down the anchors. And for fear of their lives, some of the people on board decide we are going to literally jump off the ship and we're going to swim to shore. Because it's safer for us to be in the water and to swim than it is for us to be on this boat. But what God told Paul was this: you got to have everybody stay on the boat. If you don't have everybody staying on the boat, if people are jumping off, you are not going to be able to save everybody's lives. It's only if everybody stays on the boat and has faith and trusts me that they're going to survive. And so Paul sees, hey, listen, this is a situation where, they're probably okay. The leaders, the people in charge, the captain, the owner of the boat, they're okay if some people jump off the ship. Why? Because it gives them a greater chance, they think, of being able to survive. But what Paul knows is that the next day, the next morning, they're going to need all the people working together to be able to save each other's lives. If they don't have everybody working together, they're not going to be able to accomplish what God has promised could be accomplished if they stay on the boat. It would have been easy for Paul to stay silent, but he stuck to his convictions and his values, and he said, hold on. I know people want to escape. They want to jump off the ship, but here's the deal. If anyone jumps off, our lives are not safe any longer. We have to have everybody stay on the boat. He says that. He's very clear about that. And so he's so convincing in what he says because of everything that he said before, right? He spoke with wisdom, and he's now looked at not just as a prisoner, but he's looked at something as something more, because he's beginning to be that leader who becomes in charge because of what he's done before. They say, hey, cut the ropes. Cut the ropes. We're not staying anchored here. We're not going to give people the opportunity to escape, because Paul just stuck with his convictions and his values, and he said, don't anybody get off the boat. The problem today with many people is their convictions change on a whim, it seems. People seem to be so strict and so strong in what they believed, and then when put in a situation, they're totally different. They abandon those convictions. They say they don't believe that way anymore, and they begin to be different. I'm telling you, people may disagree with your convictions and your values in life, but if they're reasonable, they will respect you for sticking to them. They will respect you for believing what you believe and not changing because of the changing society, because it's unpopular, because Hollywood is not telling you that everything that you believe is correct. We need people, Christians, who will say, you know what? I'm going to stick to my convictions and values. Why? Because I believe this is a life or death situation. And I believe my mission on this planet is to help people come to know Jesus. And if all they see is a watered down version of a Christian, they don't see a real Christian. Why would they accept a Savior where anything goes? Where things can just change. Maybe the Bible needs to be updated. Maybe some parts need to be taken out. Maybe some parts need to be added in because of our current social climate. No, listen. We are to be people that stand firm in our convictions and in our values. And even people who disagree with you, at least they will respect you for staying true to what you said you believed and not swaying with different public opinion polls and in different situations. Number 5, set the example for others to follow. Set the example for others to follow. If you want to lead when you're not in charge, set the example for other people to follow. Verse 35. As day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day that you have continued in suspense and without food, having taken nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength, for not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you. And when he had said these things, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship, and when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. Paul knew that they were going to need strength to finish this trip and preserve their lives. Now we see the full shift in leadership, where at first he was simply a prisoner, and now he has risen the ranks because of the qualities he exhibited even when he wasn't in charge. But he shows us one last thing. He sets an example by not just telling the people to eat and to take the food, but it says, then he himself eats the food. The text even says that the food encouraged them. I don't know about y'all, but there's plenty of times in my life food's encouraged me, amen? Food can be encouraging, okay? I'm just telling you. if you want to be a leader when you're not in charge, you need people not just to hear what you say, but see what you do. You want to set the example for them. You want to live with integrity. You want to be responsible. You want to be honest in your work. We need to set the example for others to see if we want to lead when we are not in charge. I love that the Lord did exactly what he said he would do to Paul. He said, hey, if everybody stays on the ship, not a single hair of anyone on board is going to be hurt. And we see the ultimate fulfillment at the end of the chapter, verse 39. Now, when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach, on which they planned, if possible, to run the ship ashore. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that tied the rudders. Then hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the vessel aground. The bow struck and remained immovable, and the stern was being broken up by the surf. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plan. Again, why? Because Paul told them what to do. They now work for him. You see this? He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest on planks or on the pieces of the ship. And so it was that they were all brought safely to land. God is faithful to fulfill the promises that he makes. I want you to know that. We've talked about that many times in the study of Acts. That if God says something, God promises something, he will bring it to pass. What a beautiful ending to this story where things are going very, very wrong. But in the midst of the story, we see the story within a story. That the man who was brought on a ship as a prisoner has now become the leader. Why? Because of the characteristics and the qualities that he exhibited of how to lead when you're not in charge. And I just want to tell you the same thing. You may be the leader of your company. You may be your own boss. You may lead in every environment in which you live, but most likely, that's not true. Most likely, most of us in the room answer to somebody. That gives an opportunity for disagreement. That gives an opportunity for discord. That gives an opportunity for, I wish I was you, because I would do you better than you're doing you. But here's the thing. We don't have to wait until we get the title or the position or the paycheck. We can begin leading today if we will follow God's path for how to lead when we're not in charge.